Vice President of Operations and a certified forensic interview instructor at one of the nation's leading police interrogation training firms, Wicklander-Zulawski. David and his colleagues use the videotapes of Brendan Dassey's interrogation to train police in all 50 states how not to interrogate. He's here to explain the do's and don'ts of interrogation.
Good morning. Thank you, Laura. As Laura mentioned, I represent an organization comprised of certified forensic interviewers that have the opportunity to train thousands of law enforcement investigators across the nation and across the globe on ethical, non-confrontational interview techniques. As an instructor, I'm here today to continue to create awareness and educate those that are in decision-making positions on what happened during the interrogations of Brendan Dassey. I first became aware of Brendan's case, like many people, by watching a documentary. And like most people, I was immediately frustrated and angry at the tactics used in Brendan's interrogation, and disappointed that our justice system accepted such a confession. As leaders in our industry, we discussed that if we say nothing, if we do nothing about this confession, it's just as good as accepting and condoning the techniques that are used. We realized that when you have the opportunity to make a difference, you take it, and we did. Since first becoming aware of the interrogation tapes, we've used Brendan's examples in front of thousands of investigative professionals across the globe as the prototype for how not to interrogate a vulnerable subject. Every time we show the video, I'm met with overwhelming support for Brendan and distaste for the tactics that were used by the practitioners in the room. These tactics include explicit threats of punishment, as Steve referenced earlier, promises of leniency, including statements such as, "Honesty will set you free," or "I think you're going to be okay here," removing any perception of consequences by Brendan. They also include the lack of counsel or representation for a vulnerable subject like Brendan, especially risky over the course of multiple hours of an interrogation in the interrogation room alone. Lastly, and most troubling, is the fact-feeding of information to Brendan about the details of the crime, resulting in a confused, contaminated, inaccurate confession. Nothing is more heartbreaking to me than hearing from Brendan himself immediately after the investigators leave the room, where he begins to recant his confession. And as Steve mentioned earlier, in Brendan's own words, "They got to my head." I'm here today to state that the combination of explicit promises, suggestions of leniency, the false evidence ploy, the removal of consequences, and fact-feeding a vulnerable subject like Brendan are the recipe for a false confession, and one that we should have no confidence in whatsoever. Thank you.